I called this little piece, and I got copies for you for after, Islamophobia, Jabberwocky Redux. I don't profess to be either an expert in constitutional law or parliamentary procedure, nor am I a member of any political group or political party or religious group. I'm just a Canadian who cares very deeply for language and the freedom to use it. Oh, aside, I've also been a professional writer and editor for 20 years. We use words in many, many ways, as metaphor, as sarcasm, as sacred communion even. And we do so, secure in the knowledge that our words will be understood, provided their meaning has internal coherence and some degree of predictability. Of all the words in Motion M103, the most problematic is Islamophobia, a term ostensibly encompassing any action that may insult or defame Islam, an idea, and any action that may harm Muslims, people. However, the word fails in its primary duty, to transmit coherent and predictable meaning. In the first place, it's not rationally possible to insult or defame an idea for the simple reason that an idea is not a person. As Faisal Sayed al-Mutar says, ideas do not have human rights. People do. Secondly, the word Islamophobia makes no reference either to people or to their human right to live unmolested. What it does reference is, curiously, specific phobia. Here's the Mayo Clinic definition of that. Specific phobias are an overwhelming and unreasonable fear of objects or situations that pose little real danger, but provoke anxiety and avoidance. So, Islamophobia actually means an overwhelming and unreasonable fear of Islam. In other words, of an idea. Not an object, not a situation, not even a person. Loaded with the purloined legitimacy of phobia, Islamophobia is a pseudo-scientific term, arbitrarily created to cover a broad range of behaviors its core meaning does not even reference. Even the Runnymede Trust, this is a British think tank that spent several years defining Islamophobia, defining the problem of anti-Muslim bigotry in Great Britain. Even the Runnymede Trust calls it not ideal, but a useful shorthand. Here's where the conflation becomes untenable. Ideas can inspire people to act, but may remain a mere fantasy until someone chooses to act upon them. However, using Islamophobia in this motion presumes that people are unable to distinguish between idea and action. In the real world, uniquely, that critique of Islam or criticism of Islamic cultural practice by Muslims or non-Muslims is itself proof of harm done. To accept that, as our government has done by passing this motion, is to co-opt Canadians into self-censorship. Now, we all know it's not possible to legislate how people think. What is possible, however, is to undermine discussion of an idea, to denigrate those who seek clarity, and ultimately, to criminalize critique or criticism of that idea. Motion M103 relies on a term that is counterintuitive at best and a lexical fraud at worst. It binds the government to spend taxpayer money to find out if this phenomenon actually exists, but nevertheless pledges to make recommendations for legislation to counter it. Let me tell you, legislation requires a higher standard of written language than useful shorthand. The circular logic of this motion is dizzying in its abject failure to distinguish between an idea and verifiable acts of anti-Muslim bigotry. The verbal or physical targeting of Muslims for abuse just because they are Muslim. Here's the rub. We already have a blasphemy law. Section 269 of the Criminal Code calls it an indictable offense carrying a punishment of up to 2 years incarceration. Similarly, Section 1 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms tethers free speech to reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. M103 has already passed. The end-run research to find the evidence that legitimizes the claims the motion itself is based on in the first place has already begun. How long do you think it will take radical Islamists, those who seek to spread the legal jurisdiction of Islam, to demand that Criminal Code 269 be applied to those Muslims or non-Muslims who critique Islam or criticize Islamic cultural practice? How long until they make the claim that they have exposed demonstrably justified reasons to impose limits on our charter right to free speech? Our government's already paved the way. Islamophobia, the very definition of incoherence and unpredictability, has been accepted by Parliament as a legitimate social issue. This motion prepares the pathway for radical Islamists to seek to legally suppress the free speech of everyone on Canadian soil. But make no mistake, its first victims will be Muslims. As the founder of the fledgling Sharia court that existed briefly in 2005 said, opting out of that Sharia court would be tantamount to blasphemy or apostasy. That declaration was a threat, however impotent at the time, to the entire Muslim Canadian community, including modern Muslims, LGBTQ Muslims, secular Muslims, atheist Muslims, unaffiliated Muslims, and ex-Muslims. We owe it to them to change the trajectory of this motion by rejecting the incoherence and unpredictability of the term Islamophobia in favor of a term like anti-Muslim bigotry. To do otherwise would be an horrific betrayal of their faith in Canada as a free and democratic society. That's the real reason I'm here today. I want the next Aqsa Parvez to be able to seek help without fear, to be able to speak openly to someone who can also speak openly. To sum up, in Canada, no matter the topic under discussion or the discomfort others may choose to derive from it, everyone has the right to wake up tomorrow morning and continue the conversation. I'd just like to keep it that way. Thank you.